We live in an age where a single device in your pocket can simulate the night sky, translate ancient texts, and capture the birth of stars millions of light years away. And yet, people still feel lost, disconnected, as though the more we invent to understand the universe, the less we understand our place within it. Isn't it ironic that we've decoded the human genome, sent probes beyond the solar system, and manipulated atoms, and still many feel like strangers to themselves? But maybe that's not a failure of science. Maybe it's an invitation. Because here's a cosmic truth. Knowledge doesn't just extend outward, it must turn inward too. For every telescope pointed toward the stars, we need a microscope focused on the soul not as a mystical construct, but as a phenomenon of consciousness emerging from the dance of atoms, neurons, and intention. Now, there's a phrase floating through modern spiritual circles: the new earth is here. To some, it conjures visions of a golden age, a shimmering paradise awaiting those who've passed some kind of metaphysical threshold. But let's reframe that idea in language that doesn't demand belief, just attention. What if the new earth isn't a destination you travel to? What if it's a frequency you learn to inhabit? Imagine a planetary operating system, not coded in binary, but in behavior, empathy, cooperation, and elevated cognition. Like a phase transition in physics, where water becomes vapor or ice depending on its energy state, human civilization, too, is subject to shifts not in matter, but in mindset. When enough molecules in a substance align, the entire system transforms. Likewise, when enough human minds align in purpose, the world around them follows. That's not wishful thinking. That's critical mass. Every major leap in human history has come not from waiting, but from reaching, from recognizing that the constraints we feel are not always physical, they are often perceptual. And perception, as cognitive science reminds us, is not reality. It is a model of reality, one that can evolve. So when someone says the gates to the new earth are open, I ask not rhetorically, what gates are they referring to? Are these gates physical structures, as in mythology? Or could they be thresholds of thought, of compassion, of action? In quantum mechanics, we know that observation changes the state of a system, but have we fully acknowledged that attention changes the trajectory of a life? Let me ask you something. When was the last time you paused long enough to notice the miracle of simply being aware that your brain, 3 pounds of organic matter, can contemplate the heat death of the universe and also mourn the loss of a loved one? That's not just remarkable, that's cosmic. This capacity to hold logic and longing in the same breath isn't just what makes us human, it may be what makes us capable of more. Dolores Cannon, whose work explored the patterns of consciousness across time and incarnation, once suggested that certain people are born during pivotal times to shift the trajectory of history. Now, whether or not you accept the specifics of her methods, the core premise is worth examining. Do you feel pulled towards something greater, not because you're escaping the world, but because you're ready to remake it? Science shows us that systems organize themselves when entropy is low enough, when energy is available, and when feedback loops are clear. The same is true for societies. If enough people operate from empathy instead of ego, from service instead of survival, then yes, something resembling a new earth begins to emerge. Not magically, but emergently. So what does ascension mean in this context? It's not levitating off the planet, it's leveling up our consciousness. It's no different than how Earth's earliest life forms evolved, from simple cells to complex organisms, by integrating information, responding to feedback, and adapting to new environments. Consciousness, too, adapts. It expands. And as it expands, so do our definitions of morality, meaning, and mutual belonging. Evolution never stopped. It just went inward. And yet, some people are still waiting for signs, as though the universe speaks only in thunder or in visions of light. But the cosmos is subtle. It speaks in pattern and probability and possibility. Do you know what the most profound signal of change is? It's when you can look at another human being and see not their politics, not their fears, not their mistakes, but their potential. That's the seismic shift. That's the gateway opening not in space, but in perception. Now, let's talk about vibration. Not in the vague sense, but in the real physical, measurable way. Every atom vibrates. Every molecule has a resonant frequency. Music, light, even your own voice is a pattern of oscillation. And so is emotion. Neuroscience confirms that emotions have physiological frequencies. Gratitude and compassion increase coherence in the heart and brain. Anger and fear disrupt it. So when we say raise your vibration, it's not poetry, it's biology. And when a society is composed of individuals who operate at higher levels of coherence, who act not from reflex but reflection, not from fear but from understanding that society stabilizes, it innovates, it thrives. This is not a prophecy, it's a probability curve, and you are the variable. We're not waiting for a galactic rescue team or divine intervention. The cosmos has already given us the raw materials, a mind capable of self-awareness, a heart capable of empathy, a body capable of action, and a planetary and fertile capable of sustaining all of it. So, what are we waiting for? The idea of the new Earth is not about escaping reality, it's about updating it. It's not about transcending the human experience, it's about dignifying it. By choosing integrity over impulse, dialogue over division, wisdom over reaction, every moment becomes a vote, every thought a ripple, every act of kindness a data point in the evolving algorithm of humanity. And yes, there will be resistance. That's to be expected. In physics, every transformation requires energy. In biology, every mutation encounters stress before adaptation. Likewise, consciousness evolves through friction, through challenge, through choice. The gates to the new Earth are not guarded, they're gravitational. They pull you in when you're ready, not when you're perfect, not when you're enlightened, but when you're willing. Willing to think differently, to listen more, to act with humility, to recognize that just as Earth orbits the sun, we orbit one another pulled by invisible forces of care, curiosity, and connection. This isn't science fiction, this is science awakened. You see, the most powerful transitions in nature are often the quietest. The moment before a supernova, the tipping point in climate, the subtle shift of a flock of birds changing direction in midair. What appears sudden is often the culmination of countless tiny alignments. So if you feel something shifting not just around you, but within you, don't dismiss it. You may be sensing a collective inflection point, the beginning of a long, slow orbit into a future that is not yet visible, but already real. We are stardust, yes, but more than that, we are the universe becoming aware of itself. And now, the universe is asking, what will you do with that awareness? Will you fold it into fear, unfold it into possibility? Will you use it to protect your ego, protect the fragile miracle of life? Will you stare at the stars in awe and never actor? Will you realize that those same atoms burning in the hearts of galaxies are also burning in you? The gates are not made of gold. They're made of choices, and they are open. You might wonder why, in a universe teeming with galaxies, black holes, dark matter, and the echo of a Big Bang, we're still talking about things like kindness. Why bother with compassion when neutron stars are colliding somewhere in deep space, when the speed of light limits how far we'll ever travel, and when the Earth itself is spinning 0 miles per hour beneath our feet? Because in all that cosmic grandeur, there is one thing that seems to matter most to us, not just as a species, but as sentient observers of this grand experiment. The experience of being alive, of being aware, of connecting. You are not a passive participant in the universe. You are an active node of perception, a receiver and transmitter of consciousness. The universe is not just out there, it's in here. And it's asking you, how will you tune your signal? Now, science doesn't yet know the full scope of consciousness. We've charted neurons, mapped synapses, measured brain waves, but we still don't fully understand how subjective awareness arises from matter. It's what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. And yet, while we may not fully understand the machinery of the mind, we are unquestionably its users. You use your consciousness every day to decide, to feel, to imagine, to regret, to hope. And that's where the gates to this so-called new Earth come in, not as metaphysical fantasy, but as a neurological, sociological, and ecological frontier. If enough people recalibrate how they perceive, feel, and act, we don't just change ourselves, we change what it means to be human. Just as ancient stars seeded the elements that make up your body iron in your blood, calcium in your bones, the experiences you feed your consciousness will determine the shape of your future self. In the language of astronomy, your thoughts are gravitational centers. They attract, they orbit, they collide, and yes, they can collapse into themselves, forming emotional singularities, or they can ignite into stars radiating energy outward. Every civilization, whether ancient or emerging, has faced this decision: evolve or erode, transform or stagnate, build a new model of cooperation, or collapse under the weight of outdated patterns. What makes this moment unique in our species story is that we are now painfully aware of the interconnected consequences of our actions. One decision in one hemisphere can trigger ecological, economic, or ideological shockwaves on the other side of the planet. We are a global nervous system now, fused not by proximity, but by data. And data, my friend, is indifferent. It reveals, it doesn't decide, that's up to us. So what does personal ascension mean in a cosmos governed by entropy? It means organizing against chaos, not through control, but through coherence, through aligning your values with your actions, your aspirations with your effort. It means rising not above others, but above your former self. Let's be honest. The old Earth, if we want to call it that, isn't just about pollution or politics. It's about inertia, about systems that reward exploitation over empathy, about minds caught in loops where fear masquerades as wisdom, and cynicism is confused for intelligence. But entropy is only half the story. The universe also self-organizes. It births galaxies, flowers, and ideas. So why not a better society? Why not a better version of you? We know from evolutionary biology that systems adapt under pressure. That stress reveals either the fragility or flexibility of life. That species survive not because they are the strongest, but because they are the most adaptable. So ask yourself, how adaptable is your worldview? How resilient is your compassion? How elastic is your imagination? Those are the muscles we need to strengthen now. The new Earth, then, isn't a new planet. It's a new pattern, a new cognitive and emotional architecture. Less about geography, more about geometry, the invisible geometry of thought. It's the shift from separation to interdependence, from hierarchy to harmony, from transaction to transformation. And just like in physics, when you shift the frame of reference, the entire landscape changes. The object hasn't moved, you have, picture this. An astronaut aboard the International Space Station looks down and sees no borders, no nations, no labels, just Earth. Fragile, luminous, alive. That's not fiction. That's perspective, and perspective changes everything. What the new Earth asks of us is not belief, but perspective. Not perfection, but participation. Because the gates are not guarded by dogma, they are opened by dialogue, by daring to ask hard questions and listen deeply for the answers, not just from others, but from the quiet intelligence that hums within your own awareness. What do you want to leave behind? What will you bring forward? What thoughts no longer serve the architecture of the future? What feelings are still echoing from the past, distorting your present? These aren't esoteric questions. They are existential ones, and they matter more than ever because we are approaching critical thresholds in climate, in technology, in human consciousness. We are the first generation with the power to destroy the biosphere and the last with the chance to protect it. That's not prophecy. That's statistical trajectory. But here's the good news. In the quantum realm, small changes lead to unpredictable outcomes. A single electron, when observed, chooses one path over another. And in human terms, a single act of courage or creativity or kindness can ripple across networks of minds in ways we cannot chart, but always in ways that matter. So if you are waiting for permission, consider this it. If you are waiting for alignment, realize it begins the moment you choose to align. If you are waiting for the new Earth to arrive, know that it arrives through you, not tomorrow, not in some astral dimension, but here, now, when you decide to think, act, and feel in ways that build rather than break, connect rather than compete. Your mind is the most complex arrangement of matter known to us in the observable universe. Do not underestimate what it can generate. And your heart beating 0 times a day without your conscious command is proof that intelligence is not only found in books or laboratories, it is woven into biology itself, into you. So breathe, observe, choose, and understand that even amid uncertainty, your presence matters, your questions matter, your willingness to imagine a better future matters. The universe has given you time. What will you do with it? The gates are open. The choice, as always, is gravitational, not imposed, but invited, not forced, but felt. And when enough of us accept the invitation not to escape this Earth, but to elevate it, then the new Earth becomes not just a possibility, but a probability. Because when perception shifts, reality follows. And reality, dear listener, is far more malleable than we were ever taught. We often think of evolution as a biological story, written in strands of DNA across millennia. But the truth is, evolution never stopped with the opposable thumb or the frontal lobe. In fact, the most critical evolutionary leap we face now is not biological at all. It's ethical, it's conscious, it's social. The survival of our species on this planet, in this thin atmosphere, on this spinning rock orbiting an average star, is no longer about adapting to the wild. It's about adapting to ourselves, to the systems we've created, to the minds we've conditioned, to the beliefs we've inherited. And here's the great cosmic irony. We've become our own environment. Our fears shape policy. Our beliefs shape science funding. Our consumer choices carve canyons into rainforests. The Earth is no longer merely a set in it's a mirror. And that reflection, it's revealing something undeniable. If we want a different world, we must become different observers of it. Now, in physics, there's a concept known as the observer effect, where the act of observation alters the outcome of an experiment. Most famously demonstrated in quantum mechanics, it tells us that reality at its most fundamental level is not entirely independent of the one watching it. If that's true in subatomic particles, imagine what it means in human systems. What you observe in the world, whether it's injustice, division, disparities, those are real. But what you choose to see first and how you respond will shape not just your internal world, but the entire feedback loop of human culture. Every story we tell about who we are, what we're capable of, what the future holds feeds into the operating system of civilization. It defines the parameters of what we think is possible. So ask yourself, what story are you running? Is it one of scarcity or of abundance? Of competition or cooperation? Of inherited suffering or conscious rebirth? This moment in history is not waiting for grand saviors or prophetic visions. It's waiting for engineers of empathy, architects of awe, scientists who ask better questions, leaders who remember they too are stardust. And perhaps most importantly, individuals who choose to master themselves before attempting to master others. In astrophysics, we use the term event horizon to describe the boundary around a black holy point of no return. Cross it, and even light can't escape. But there's another kind of horizon we don't often talk about, the horizon of awareness. What lies beyond it, we do not know. But once you reach it, you cannot go back. You cannot unlearn what you've learned. You cannot unsee the fragility of life, the interconnectedness of ecosystems, the moral geometry of your choices. That's where many of us are now standing at the edge of that awareness. So what happens when enough people cross that threshold? What happens when we no longer define power by domination, but by integration? When we no longer worship productivity, but value presence? When we see the forest not just as lumber, but as lungs? then the new Earth is not a fantasy, it is an inevitability. But let me be clear, this isn't about utopia. Utopias are fixed. They stagnate. This is about emergence. It's about building systems that evolve as we evolve, that refine themselves as we grow wiser, kinder, more informed. Because entropy is relentless. And if we don't consciously apply energy, effort, vision, discipline, the system will decay. That's not pessimism. That's thermodynamics. The good news, we are full of energy. Potential energy in our ideas, kinetic energy in our actions, thermal energy in our passion. We are bursting with it if only we'd learn to direct it with precision, like a laser rather than a flashlight. Focus, coherence, intention. That's how you bend reality. Not through superstition or denial of science, but through alignment of your actions with your highest logic and your deepest values. That's what the new Earth demands. Not new technology, though it helps, but new coherence between the heart and the mind, between the individual and the collective, between short-term pleasure and long-term responsibility. In cosmology, there's a term called cosmic background radiation, the lingering echo of the Big Bang, present in every direction. It is the whisper of the universe's birth, still audible if you know how to listen. So too does Earth hum with signals, not just electromagnetic, but emotional, cultural, ethical. The question is, what frequencies are you tuned to? Fear, shame, outrage, or possibility? Patience? Wonder? Let me remind you, wonder is not childish. It's essential. It is the engine of science, the heartbeat of philosophy, the source code of progress. Without wonder, we become stagnant, cynical, dangerous. With it, we become explorers not of territory, but of truth. And in this age of digital distraction, polarized thinking, and ecological urgency, wonder may be the most radical act of all, because it requires you to pause, to see freshly, to ask not, how do I win, but what am I missing? And if you listen closely, you may discover that what you're missing is not out there. It's within. This is not an abstract idea. It has real implications. When you see yourself not as a separate entity, but as a node in a vast biological and cosmic network, you begin to think differently about your impact. You eat differently. You vote differently. You create differently. You love differently. You no longer see problems as things out there to be solved, but as patterns in here to be reconfigured. That's the revolution. Quiet, profound, unstoppable. And like any celestial body gaining momentum, once it moves, it does not stop. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop, as the poet once said. But let me offer a scientific twist. You are not just stardust, you are star tech. The literal outcome of billions of years of cosmic processing, refined into a self-aware, decision-making organism with the capacity to alter planetary evolution. That's not poetry. That's astrophysics and biology having a conversation through your DNA. So act like it. Don't diminish your role. Don't hide behind systems or politics or fate. You are not powerless. You are not incidental. You are the hinge on which the door of this era swings. And the gates, they don't open with passwords. They open with perspective. They don't ask for credentials. They ask for curiosity. They don't reward certainty. They reward courage. This is your invitation, not from me, not from any ideology, but from the universe itself. To participate, to question, to construct, to align, not because the future is guaranteed to be better, but because it can be. And in a universe governed by probability, potential is everything. The rest is up to you. There is a tendency, understandable but misguided, to believe that grand change must come from grand acts. That the new Earth, or whatever you wish to call, the next phase of humanity's evolution, will arrive through cataclysm or miracle, through the flash of divine intervention, or the crack of global revolution. But that's not how most things in the cosmos work. Galaxies don't explode into being. They swirl into coherence. Planets aren't hurled into orbit. They settle there over time drawn by quiet, invisible forces. Gravity doesn't yell. It whispers persistently. And so too with us. The greatest shift we can make is not sudden. It is accumulative. It is directional. It is the slow, steady rotation of our internal compass toward a greater axis of meaning, toward clarity, honesty, compassion, and truth. We've seen this pattern before. In evolutionary biology, species evolve not in single grand jumps, but in micro-mutation steeny shifts that over time produce wings from limbs, language from instinct, morality from survival. Human consciousness is undergoing its own version of this now. We are mutating from self-interest to shared interest, from fragmented attention to deliberate presence, from fighting for power to recognizing that true power lies in the ability to uplift, not suppress another sentient being. And yet, it's not easy, because the systems we've built, from our economies to our education models, were designed for a different paradigm, a different brain, a different era. These structures are like software still running on an outdated operating system, reactive, extractive, defensive. But that doesn't mean the code can't be rewritten. In fact, it already, eyes line by line, decision by decision, in conversations like this one, in minds like yours, in moments you think no one notices, because the shift to a new Earth doesn't begin when the media reports it. It begins when you choose integrity in a room where deception is easier, when you choose patience in a world addicted to speed, when you choose understanding where judgment would be more gratifying. These are not spiritual sentiments. These are neurological rewrites. They change the neural architecture of your brain. And when practiced by enough individuals, they change the collective brain of society, its norms, its laws, its incentives, its stories. Now, let's talk briefly about stories. Human beings are narrative creatures. We don't just respond to facts, we respond to meaning. Two people can experience the same event and walk away with completely different realities based on the story they tell themselves about what happened. The old Earth was full of stories. There's not enough. It's us versus them. Power is about control. You are what you produce. And now we're rewriting the story. The new Earth begins not when we invent new technologies, but when we invent better stories. Stories that include more perspectives, that celebrate interdependence, that elevate dignity over dominance, that tell our children, you belong, you matter, you are part of this symphony, not separate from it. When we change the narrative, we change the future. But here's the scientific truth. Even with a new story, change requires friction. In thermodynamics, no system changes state without input. Water doesn't boil until heat is applied. Light doesn't bend until it encounters gravity. Likewise, consciousness doesn't evolve without pressure. So if you feel overwhelmed, discouraged, even disoriented by the rapid unraveling of the old ways, don't resist it. Understand it. It's a sign that the system is trying to update, that we are reaching the threshold of transformation, that the shell is cracking, not to break us, but to release us. And in that process, your role is not to escape, but to engage. Engage with curiosity, engage with patience, engage with that deep internal intelligence that tells you when something feels aligned and when it doesn't. Because one of the greatest tools we have underestimated and underutilized is attention. Where you place your attention is where you place your power. Attention is not passive. It's a force multiplier. It's how a star collapses into a singularity, not by getting bigger, but by focusing its mass into a smaller and smaller space until even light bends around it. So too with your consciousness. Focus it, not on distractions, not on outrage, not on fear, but on what builds, what connects, what uplifts, what clarifies. And you'll find that reality begins to warp around that center. Possibilities open, solutions emerge, patterns reorganize. You don't need to control the world to influence it. You need only to become a gravitational point of coherence where others, sensing your clarity, begin to orbit more calmly. It's not magic, it's resonance. In music, when two tuning forks are aligned in frequency, striking one causes the other to vibrate. That's resonance. In physics, It's how systems amplify one another. And in society, it's how movements begin. One mind, vibrating clearly, coherently, authentically, can awaken hundreds of others simply by being what it is, undistorted. That is the gate. That is the path. Not in some distant utopia, but in the very choices you make with your next breath, the next word you speak, the next impulse you choose to resist or express. And so, as you stand here figuratively, cosmically at the edge of what might be, the real question is not whether the new Earth is real. That's irrelevant. The question is, will you be real? Will you be fully awake inside your own body? Will you stop outsourcing your worth? Will you start treating your mind like the precious astronomical instrument that it is? Will you own your gravity? Because make no mistake, there is no going back. Not because some prophecy said so, or because an age is ending, but because you've already seen too much. You've seen the fragility of systems, the poverty of shallow meaning, the emptiness of constant distraction, and now you're hungry for substance. Good. Stay hungry, because the universe feeds those who ask sincere questions. And it's okay to not have all the answers. In fact, it's preferable. In science, the most profound insights often begin with, "That's strange." So let yourself be curious. Let yourself wonder what kind of civilization we could build if we prioritize well-being over wealth. If we measured success, not in GDP, but in empathy per capita. If we design schools not to compete, but to cooperate. If we define strength not by how much we can hold, but by how much we can release. That's not naive. That's design. And just like any system, what we build depends on the architecture of our intentions. So, what are yours? If you could redesign this world, its rules, its rituals, its relationships, what would you preserve? What would you discard? What would you dare to invent? Because ultimately, the new Earth is not a prophecy. It is a prototype. It's not a place you reach. It's a state you create. It begins every time you align your perception with your principles. Every time you hold a mirror to your ego and say, "Not today." Every time you fall in love with a question rather than chase an answer. The gates are not guarded. They are gravitational. And they are open not for the perfect, not for the chosen, but for the willing. Let's talk about time, not the ticking of a clock or the turning of a calendar, but time as the universe experiences it, as space-time, as the fourth dimension woven into the very fabric of our reality. We've grown up with a linear idea of time, past behind us, future ahead, and the present a fleeting moment we barely inhabit. But in Einstein's relativistic universe, time is more flexible. It bends, it stretches, it dilates. It isn't fixed, it's relational. It depends on your speed, your gravity, your position in space. In other words, there is no single now that applies to everyone everywhere. Your now is yours. And that's not just poetics, it's physics. So what does this mean for transformation? It means that awakening personal, cultural, or planetary doesn't follow a universal clock. It unfolds at the speed of perception. The future isn't waiting out there somewhere. It's being built right here in your mind, in this very moment. Because if time is subjective, then reality itself is partially sculpted by the observer, not through magic, through awareness, through choice. The new Earth isn't a future place we arrive at on a calendar date. It's a time signature you align with when you become present, clear enough to notice what's already changing. And that change begins with how you see yourself. Let me remind you, identity is not a fixed object. It's not a noun. It's a verb. You are not something, you are some being, some becoming, a process, a dynamic system of thoughts, memories, and intentions, organizing themselves around a core of awareness. And that awareness, it's not located in a file drawer behind your eyes. It's emergent, it's fluid. It arises from billions of electrical signals across trillions of synapses, choreographing themselves into this symphony you call I. So when you say, "This is just who I am," pause. because that sentence is a fossil. You are not stone, you are river. And the moment you believe you cannot change is the moment you've stopped understanding how the universe works. Atoms change, stars change, galaxies collide and reform. You are made of that same change. So embrace it. The physics of inner transformation is not mystical, it's thermodynamic. You apply energy focus, emotion, intention, the system shifts. You add pressure challenge, contradiction, and the system adapts. Neuroscience has a term for this, neuroplasticity. The brain rewires itself based on what you repeatedly think, feel, and do. You are literally reshaping your own internal architecture with every repetition, every reflection, every choice. So, transformation is not a lightning bolt from above. It is a biological, chemical, and electrical reality. And ascension? That's just another word for reintegration. The reintegration of mind and body, of thought and action, of self and cosmos. Now, this reintegration demands responsibility not in the punitive sense, but in the literal one, the ability to respond, to tune your perception with such precision that you begin to notice the subtle connections most people miss. The feedback loop between your thoughts and your environment, the echo between your actions and their planetary ripple, the symmetry between your inner peace and the chaos you absorb from others. This is not self-help. This is systems thinking. This is what happens when consciousness becomes intelligent enough to observe itself in motion across time, across space, across culture. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You begin to notice how your morning mood affects your language, how your language shapes your relationships, how those relationships inform your sense of belonging, and how belonging, or the lack of it, affects your willingness to care. Chareas, that elusive word, not just a soft emotional state, but a force, a fuel, the foundation of all sustainable systems. Without care, ecosystems collapse. Without care, technology dehumanizes. Without care, power devours itself. And care begins when awareness slows down long enough to really notice what matters. That's why attention is the new gold. Not because advertisers want it, but because it's what you use to aim your consciousness. And where you aim your consciousness is where your future will grow. So choose carefully and know that you are never too small to matter. That's another illusion we must dispel. Because in physics, we know that even a single photonic quantum of light can collapse a wave function. That a single mutation in a strand of DNA can create an evolutionary breakthrough. That a single particle well-timed, well-placed can tip the balance of an entire system. You are that particle. And your timing, impeccable. Because here you are, alive, awake, in the very moment when civilization is redefining itself, facing a bifurcation point between breakdown and breakthrough, noise and signal, fear and imagination. You don't need to wait for the Earth to change. The Earth is already changing geologically, climatically, chemically. The real question is, will our consciousness evolve at the same pace? Will we upgrade our systems of thought and governance to match the complexity of the world we now inhabit? Will we rise not in elevation, but in integration? Will we begin to live as if we are part of a living system, not just on Earth, but as Earth? Because that, at its core, is what the new Earth asks of us. Not to leave this planet, but to become worthy of it. To earn our place, not through conquest, but through contribution. To understand that every breath you take is borrowed from a tree. That every heartbeat is synchronized to a magnetic field generated by a molten iron core 60 kilometers beneath your feet. That every atom in your body was forged in the collapse of ancient stars. And that you are the way the universe experiences itself for a brief moment as human. So the gates are not out there. They're not in a temple, a book, a revelation, or a rapture. They are in your perception. They are in your pattern. They are in your pause before reaction. They are in the choice to pay attention. And they open one decision at a time. Look up. Seriously, when was the last time you did? Not at your phone, not at your calendar, but at the sky, at the very fabric of the universe stretching endlessly above you. That sky is not just a background, it's a birthplace. It is where every element that composes Your bones, your blood, your breath was forged inside collapsing stars billions of years ago. You are not just in the universe, you are the universe configured temporarily as a human being. So act like it. Act like someone who remembers that galaxies are your ancestors, that the Earth is your home, not by right, but by reciprocity, that time is not your enemy, it is your canvas. Because we are at a momentary, fleeting, extraordinary when a species becomes aware of itself at planetary scale. You have satellites mapping the oceans, algorithms decoding genomes, telescopes seeing back 13.4 billion years to the first light, and yet the real leap we face is not technological, it's existential. Will we become wise enough to wield the power we've inherited? We've split the atom, we've cloned life, we've digitized thought, and still, we've barely scratched the surface of emotional intelligence, planetary stewardship, or collective empathy. It's not that we lack the tools, it's that we lack the unifying story. The story that says, you matter not because of what you own, but because of what you are. A bridge between the finite and the infinite. A neural spark in the collective brain of a species that is just barely starting to realize it is one organism, one breath, one biome, one fragile chance at getting this right. And what would it mean to get it right? It wouldn't mean perfection. That's a fantasy. It would mean sustainability, harmony, a civilization that understands its limits, not as constraints, but as design features, that knows its fragility is its beauty, that treats life not as a resource to be extracted, but as a symphony to be preserved. Because here's the truth, Earth has been many things: a volcanic wasteland, a frozen marble, a jungle, a desert, and it will become many more long after we're gone. The real question isn't whether the Earth will survive us. It's whether we will survive ourselves. And the answer to that doesn't lie in government or religion or technology. It lies in your next thought. That's the scale we're dealing with now. The butterfly effect isn't just a poetic metaphor. In chaotic systems like climate, like culture, like conscious destiny, inputs produce unpredictable outcomes. So be that input. Be the variable that tips the equation. Not because you're better than others, but because you remembered something they forgot, that the laws of the cosmos also apply to conscience. That light takes time to travel, but it always gets there. That gravity bends all paths, but intention determines direction. That entropy will win in the end, but in the meantime, you get to choose what kind of order you create. This is what ascension really means, not floating off the ground, but rooting into the truth of who and what you are. Not escaping the Earth, but becoming intimate with it. Not waiting for miracles, but realizing that existence itself is one. So as the sun rises tomorrow, and it will, carried by the same rotational inertia that has spun this planet for 4.5 billion years, ask yourself, what will I bring into the light? A clearer mind? A lighter heart? A more courageous voice? Because those are the currencies of the new Earth. Not gold, not power, but coherence, compassion, and vision. Let others argue over the end times. You focus on the beginning time, this beginning, this breath, this choice, because all revolutions begin here. Inside, in silence, in sincerity, in the terrifying beauty of realizing that you are free, that no one is coming to save us, because we are not here to be saved. We are here to become stewards, scientists, poets, lovers, listeners, builders of bridges across hearts, across cultures, across time. And so, dear traveler, if you've listened this far, you already know the gates to the new Earth are not locked. They are not guarded. They do not open with dogma or doctrine. They open with perception. They open when you start seeing clearly, thinking critically, loving deeply, acting wisely. And once you step through it, really there is no return. Not because you've left the old world behind, but because you've realized you were the key all along. So step through and bring others with you. One breath at a time, one thought at a time. One ripple in the cosmic sea of consciousness at a time. The gates are open. The future is listening. And the universe quietly, curiously, patient lies waiting to see what kind of species we decide to become. Make it count.